everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How are you? I hope you're having a fabulous day. Whatever you're doing, I hope it gives you joy. You know, I've been noticing that not a lot of us get enough joy in our lives, and I have determined that we each on an individual level can absolutely do something about that. So, if you're not having enough joy, man, fire it up. Go get some ice cream. Go sit on the beach. Go sit in the mountains. Go in the backyard and smell some fresh air and fresh trees. Make something delicious for yourself in the kitchen. You know, my grandma had an amazing way of talking about life and attitude. And one of the things that she talked about was the fact that no one is poor in their pocketbook, they are poor in their mind. I mean, my bank balance might be zero, right? Yet being poor, she always said, was a state of mind. So just remember not to shortchange yourself in your state of mind. You can be rich of spirit. You can be rich in your mind. And we can always find something that's amazing in the moment. There are a few life situations that are really tough to do that in. Yet for most of us, most days, find your joy. That's our responsibility. I have faith in you. I know you can do it. Yes. I got such an exciting podcast prepared today for you. We are going to be talking today about a phenomenon that you may or may not recognize. It's something that we see on the internet all the time, especially if you are searching a more wordy social media site like Facebook. Obviously, Instagram is picture-driven, TikTok is video-driven, all these things. Yet if you are a blog reader, or you are a news reader, or you're a reader in general, which honestly I tend to be in my life, I would honestly rather read something than watch a video. And it's simply because I prefer the density of information that is present in the written materials as opposed to something that I'm watching. And I mean, obviously, I'd rather watch a music video than read it. That would get weird. However, overall, I'm a reader. And so if you are a reader, at least informationally, I'm not much of a fiction reader, but I'm really a heavy informational reader or nonfiction reader. You'll come across a phenomenon that is online that is called TLDR, and it means too long, didn't read. And a lot of times, if you are reading something with substantive content, you will see someone invariably in the comments put TLDR, too long, didn't read. And I think to myself, okay, well, if it was so long and you didn't read it, you sure took the time to comment 4 letters. So what's that about? The reason I'm bringing this up today is because we're going to be talking about the downfall of a meme society. And what does that mean? You know, there are a lot of spiritual tenets behind the idea of a meme society. And that's what I call where we've gotten in the United States, spiritually, intellectually, and mentally, the meme society. And what the heck is that? Well, one of the things that I would put a focus on is back to the too long didn't read issue. Back in the day, way a long time ago, when cars were cars and men were men and women were women and biscuits were biscuits, you see, there was a thing called journalism. And the journalism, you see, involved lots and lots of little bitty pieces of words. They were just little ones, little phrases. They were all streamed together there. And they were called details. And they were called facts, you see, facts. And it's been known that these details and facts, you see, take up a little bit of space on the paper, which used to be made from trees and written upon by well-meaning people. Now it's a screen, you see. So these details and these facts, they take up all this room on the screen. They look like somebody dipped a little ant, you see, in an inkwell and let it go tap, dancing across the page forever. Yes, too long didn't read. So, at the risk of sounding like someone from a different era completely, I will tell you that I'm astounded by how many TLDR notifications that I'm seeing all over the place online. And these are on well-written journalistic articles. Too long didn't read. TLDR, TLDR, TLDR. So I got into a discussion with a friend of mine about this phenomenon, because what I find so interesting is that people just don't want to take the time to read it. It's too long. It's too long. I look at the words and I'm overwhelmed and it's too long. Really, man? It's a Facebook post. How long can it be, dude? So I started thinking about what really makes a TLDR post happen. And I mean, that's fine. If you're somebody who literally just is on Facebook to look at cat videos and you don't want to read a big thing, I get that. What I'm talking about is a predisposition that we seem to have in the United States at this time, that everything of meaning ought to be spoon-fed to us in a way that's super convenient for us, so that we don't actually have to engage our gray matter and we can just get the gist and move on. And it's easy to digest. I just need it easy to digest. And as you can tell by my tone, I do have a tone, this podcast, I realize. But as you can tell by my tone, I'm really finding myself at the end of my emotional and psychological and really my spiritual rope with this TLDR phenomenon. I've been a person who receives a lot of information, right, to put out there for people. And one fact has a lot of underlying details that underscore the fact, that make the fact very important. That's why they're called details. Yet what I'm noticing is that there is this glance over that people will do to online content or even written content. I mean, I've seen people do it in books on the airplane. It's disturbing. And they'll just kind of scroll through and close it out because it just looks like too many words. Now, I do understand it, again, if a person is legitimately pinched for time, or if they're heavily dyslexic, or there's some issues with reading. I get that. Yet I'm just talking about most of America's butthurt need to get through something quickly, to get on to the next thing, and then call themselves an expert. You see, that's what got us into this trouble of fake news in the first place. So here we are. We've got legions and legions of people out there who are furious with the media because the media is spoon-feeding me information. And they're cutting and drying it, and they're partitioning my facts, and I want my facts. But the media is shaping everything, and I'm not getting the truth. So you try to give people the truth, which involves details, which involves words, which involves lines on your screen or piece of paper, which involves more right to left movement of your eyeball, which involves more attachment to the critical thinking process of the prefrontal cortex in your brain, which involves more pondering, which involves more thought. And you get all those which involves in there, and people throw a fit, and you get a TLDR. So I was recently responding to a Facebook post in a Facebook group that was asking a very complex question about how a problem could be solved. And I mean, it was an exceptionally complex question. It was not a, hey, you guys, what color should I paint my house, white or green? You know, it was an exceptionally layered, complex problem. And each one of the solutions that were part of this complex problem had many, many modalities of deconstruction to it. That's just the reality of the issue, you know? So I answered this particular question. And I mean, it was a lengthy answer, right? Because it was a very complicated question. And I'm pulling in information from the etheric realm and I'm overviewing things. And it was just the typical way I speak, quite honestly. And I recognize, gang, and I fully own that I'm an Italian person. I'm a long-winded person. I work with angels who speak in giant cubes of information. And those cubes of information are so densely packed with information. It's nuts. So I get that I use a lot of words. I've had people write to me about this podcast, and they say things like, I would love to listen to you, but I get lost in the first 10 minutes. You're talking about so many things, I just can't keep up. I just wish you would talk about one thing. And I mean, that's a fair comment, okay? What I don't understand about it is in my mind, I am talking about one thing, but apparently there's many things involved in the way that I talk about one thing. So I get that my style isn't for anybody. Going back to this post, people were commenting, and a very, very well thought out, well-meaning person mentioned, I would love to share this post, except it's going to get a TLDR everywhere that I post it. And is there a way to kind of boil these concepts down? And I literally said, hey, you know what? If you can figure out a way to do that, good for you, because that is obviously not my gift. And I don't have any ego attached to it. As long as the reasons behind things are there, if you can bullet point it, go for it. And this individual happened to be a professional writer for political candidates and CEOs and whatever. So she bullet pointed it like a monster, and it was great. And I appreciated it very much. Yet it really brought my attention to the fact that people are so terrified to get this too long didn't read notice that they just aren't putting good information out. Or they're putting information out that's so basic, a 2-year-old could get a hold of it. And so this is going to get really complicated because we all have determined, A, I use a lot of words, and B, I have to attach every single detail to every single reason, to every single everything, because to me, that's how we get to the bottom of things, right? So I got to thinking about this, and I got to looking at the complicated relationship that America has with our media, and how much the fake media stuff got people up in arms, and how really baby boomers were the top demographic in 2016 that were clicking on clickbait headlines that were fake news and passing them around, because that was a generation that, in fairness, was taught that Walter Cronkite was a legitimate person who was a legitimate journalist who knew things and could be trusted. So that generation was passing around news in 2016 that was totally false. And a lot of that generation was the voting bloc in 2016, which is kind of how we ended up with the president that we got. Well, that and some other creative things that I've talked about for years and we don't need to go back to. However, what I would tell you is that the meme society is somewhat of a spiritually challenging place to be, because what it indicates is that people simply do not have time to uptake any information, or desire, really, to uptake information or to learn. So what the hell does that mean in real life? What it means is, again, as I was kind of making a joke out of it earlier, but we've got a huge sections of our population furious at the media because the media is shaping messages for them. That's what they'll say. Now, I'm not always the biggest proponent of network news, and I've been very vocal about how I do not enjoy personally watching network news magazine programs. Once I really, really got a good clock on how opinionated they were and biased and just bizarre, and a lot of negativity, whether it was Fox News or MSNBC or out on these polar magazine shows, which is fine if people are into that, yet it should be entertainment, not news, right? Because it's just somebody going off on their opinion, like a talk radio host, like a Howard Stern or a Rush Limbaugh. Somebody's just blabbing off about their opinion and referencing a news article. So when we look at the complaint societally that news and the media is shaping our messages, well, news and media gang are attached to sponsors. Okay, they're trying to make money. There's a reason. There's a big, fat bottom reason that networks like MSNBC or like Fox go to such extremes. And it's because it attracts people who are simply wanting to hear an entertaining take on news that is within their belief system, right? A news magazine show. And those people all have money to spend. So whether it's MSNBC, whether it's Fox, whether it's an online platform, then you've got people who are recruiting very specifically people with pretty stiff opinions who are pretty passionate about their opinions. So if I'm an advertiser, I'm going to want to advertise to those people who may be watching that program. You don't find a lot of advertisements on Fox News in their break segments. You don't find a lot of advertisements for, vegan food. You don't find a lot of advertisements on MSNBC for, hunting trip packages or something like that. So the people who are needing to make money are doing so in these particular areas. The meme society means that we are counting on someone else to spoon feed us information and boil it down to something that I can digest. Well, the problem with the meme society is an emotional, spiritual, and intellectual laziness that then pervades every other piece of our life. And this is not intended to push people's buttons. I love a good meme with the rest of them. Heck, I make memes. They're fun. Yet really, when we begin to making everything a TLDR issue, too long didn't read issue, we've got to start asking ourselves, why am I really afraid to engage content and learn? Now, there is such thing as something so long and droning that it's just mind-numbing. And there are times when somebody can beat something of content into like the dead horse being beaten into the ground. Yet a meme society, gang, there's so much more wrong there. So when we're spiritually looking at things needing to be boiled down to a bullet point for us, organized religion. Let's look right there. TLDR, organized religion, realized TLDR the minute they looked at the Bible with those waffle-thin pages and all the hard-to-read words in Old English, the thou shalts and the thou shalt noteth. And the religious institutions thought, this is TLDR all the way. We're going to bullet point it into little pieces and tell people what to believe. And so they did. And so little people sat there like baby birdies with their little mouthies open in the nest. And here comes organized religion and just stuffing those little bullet points down the mouthie of the baby birdies. And there is belief, born in a nest, not able to feed yourself, taking whatever somebody else just shoves down your gullet. This was old world religion for many, 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 many years. Many decades, So if we're looking at a meme society, what did that do to people's critical ability to think? When we just needed everything boiled down for us by the priest and shoved down our little baby birdie beaks, and we just swallowed it and said, okay, that's the way it is. That's God and the devil. Tweet, tweet. We look at opportunities there for corrupt establishment to really mow over the top of people. People become poorly educated. They become poorly in the know. And there is a preoccupation also in our learning process or our uptaking process in America with making sure that we're hot and trendy in the way that we communicate. Well, this is really kind of inane because every individual communicates differently. And when we're talking about the spiritual tenets of communication or fixing a problem, it is extremely necessary to bring into these problem-solving mechanisms details. Yet the TLDR format doesn't want the details. It can't be bothered by the details. We just want the quick fix. We want the fad diet. We want the one silver bullet that's going to save it all. We want the one pill we can take that's going to get rid of our hormone bloat. We want the one pill that we can take to make our boy junk work like a motorboat. We want the one thing to fix it all. Because in America, we've been trained to be bloated, weird baby birds laying in a nest without our feathers on our wings, with our big fat bellies, with our big baby birdie mouthies open to the sky. Feed me, feed me, feed me, tweet, 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 tweet. And we lay there and we just want somebody to stuff something in there just so we can chew on it and feel full for 5 minutes. Then we tweet for the next thing. That's a god-awful visual, isn't it? Yet, when you're someone who's wired like me and you observe energy signatures, this is what you then are able to look at, is the fact that we are making ourselves, we ourselves are becoming these fat, plumeless baby birds laying there waiting for somebody to shove something in our mouth and say, this should taste good. We are doing that. The media is meeting us where we're at. And so kind of flinging back to the TLDR discussion on this Facebook group, again, I had a wonderful gal boil these particular concepts down to a bullet point. Yet what I also found after I had written out some just potential solutions to these problems, and it wasn't like they were the be-all and end-all, for God's sakes, and nobody even needs to agree with what I wrote. I just found it interesting that some people began to jump on negatively and talk about, well, no wonder this problem isn't getting fixed, because of rambling like this. And I thought, wow, that's cool if you think I'm full of beans on this comment. Yet what really struck me with that is this desperate addiction energy that was coming through the frustration in these posts. It was this addiction for the next high, the addiction to the next bullet point or the next quick fix. And we are so addicted in America. The meme society is not sustainable. We cannot sustain a society on only a few bullet points crafted to the lowest common denominator, not just intellectually, but spiritually and sociologically. We cannot forge a society and build it when people are absolutely unwilling to help themselves in any way become better or to expand their knowledge or to grow their brain because they can't be bothered. They don't have time. They're just being too fabulous. I have too much going on. But God dang that media for manipulating information. But whatever, it's their fault. It's their fault. Do you know that one of the signs of addiction, seriously, this gets heavy, so bear with me, is an unwillingness to engage accountability in a situation that you have completely authored yourself? That is a massive sign of addiction. There is a denial in that lack of accountability because the person has got to disassociate from the need in themselves and create a victimhood under which they can medicate. It's one of the biggest tenets of addictive cycles. And look how much blame we have in this country. Look how we can't be bothered with the details. Look how we just blame everybody else. We're just a country of crazy addicts wandering around. And this is not to make light of people who have serious drug addictions or who have serious food or porn addictions. Yet, oh my God, our country, gang, alcohol addiction, sugar addiction is off the hook. Work addiction is off the hook. The need is so off the hook in America because we're a capitalist country and we'll sell you something to fix that. We'll sell you big pharma pills to fix what's going on in your head. We'll sell you more sugar to make that serotonin level spike in your brain for 5 seconds and make you feel good about your life for 20 minutes until you metabolize the sugar. Then you crash and feel like crap. We'll sell you gateways to the most disgusting, naughty, terrible, awful porn you've ever seen, victimizing children and women and young men. And we'll sell it to you because the naughty factor jacks up your serotonin level doing something you shouldn't be doing. I mean, we're running after the drugs in our head in the meme society. And why? I mean, why are we so freaking afraid to stand still and grow? It's bad. Listen, and I'm not trying to throw big old giant boulders through anybody's glass house here. I've had my own struggles with things I've been desperate around. And perhaps that's why I have such an acute observation/opinion on it. Because I noticed that this nation sets us up to be very addicted to many things and to be spoon-fed many things. And we're even told that it's normal. Get this crap. We're even told that it's normal to not want to engage content that is longer. And we're told, well, we just don't have the attention span we used to. Well, actually, let's break that sentence down a minute. We just don't have the attention span that we used to. I'm a big brain mapping nut, right? And there is science that shows that as we have been using our handheld devices, which have preset ways of being manipulated. In other words, if I open up my iPhone, I swipe up, okay? That is a muscle memory issue. And if it doesn't read my face properly, I type in my little code. That's a muscle memory issue. And I know right where Facebook is, so I go flip, flip, click. That's a muscle memory issue. These are all tiny little muscle memory actions to achieve a treat. So let's look at a rat in a cage. That is a science experiment. Scientists will want the rat to complete one specific task. And in order to do that, there's a treat at the end. And it teaches the rat that if you move a certain way, maybe moving a lever or going through a maze a certain way or whatever, there's a treat at that particular end. And the little serotonin level for the rat goes up, and the rat's happy for a minute. It eats its little secret Cheeto or whatever they give it. And that's how you train a rat. Well, humans are mammals, and our brains map in a similar way to a rat's, which is why they use rats for experiments. Nice to know, right? Boy, anytime you don't like what someone is doing in the news, a political figure, a world leader, just remember how close our brain mapping is that to a rat's. And it'll all make a lot of sense. Hanging out in the sewer, eating poop, thinking that's a great life. Yeah. So anyway, when we go through these muscle memory prompts and we get a prize at the end, ooh, let's see who liked my post. Ooh, let's go have a conversation. We're literally being trained to do the least amount of work for the easiest high possible. That is not accidental, gang. That's how you sell product. That's how you sell product. There have been television shows. I'm going to put a pin in that. We're going to expand on the sell product portion. I have been offered anchor positions, paranormal anchor positions, not news anchor, God help everybody, paranormal anchor positions on television shows. If I would just be willing to not talk about half of what we talk about, or even a third, or even a fifth. If I talked about 1/5 of what maybe one of these podcasts was about. And it's not an ego thing. It's not like I think I'm so brilliant. Everybody needs to hear every stinking word I say. I'm doing a lot of channeling during these podcasts. I'm also trying to keep up with a lot of angels. And I also want you to learn stuff, so we don't collapse into a meme society, because we're going to get there in a minute about what happens if we stop engaging our gray matter. So I've had to turn down television series because either they wanted me as a writer or they wanted me as a television personality. And they would say things like, can you just not include so many details? So I'd say, okay, well, why don't you just tell me which details you want me to include? Well, we need you to decide that. Well, I'm going to include all of them because they're important. No, they're really not. No, but they are. They're really important. No, they're really not. Can you just boil it down for me? Okay. Like say we were talking about this conversation. This podcast, they'd want me to boil it down. So I would say, well, and I'd go into my description. They'd say, no shorter. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, let's see, we're a nation of addicts. We'll probably, okay, let's just lose that. We've been spoon-fed propaganda for years from World War II, World War I. Okay, probably lose that. Nutrition. I'll stick with nutrition. And I'll talk about how we're eating foods that limit our critical thought ability in our prefrontal cortex. Could you just lose that, please? That's too complicated. Well, can you tell me what you want me to say then? Can you just say that, I don't know, too many words are bad and too many short words are bad and we need to get somewhere in the middle. Can you say that? And literally, these are producer meetings. And I'm thinking to myself, I could, but Are you actually going to put that on TV? That's weird, man. You know, the fact that we have this emotional and spiritual excuse, and I do think it's an excuse. I'm sorry if this is going to push some buttons. I can feel it happening in the future already. But it's an excuse that we cannot slow down for 5 seconds and absorb more information. And, you know, I understand that we're busy. I understand we're all tired. I understand that a lot of us are being pulled in a million different directions. But how many of us lay down at night and pick up a book to put ourselves to sleep, to get our brain into some kind of theta wave routine so we'll go to sleep, brainwave-wise? And we can read a fiction book. We can read, you know, creepy flowers in the attic for the 90th time because we've got some sick kink in our guts somewhere. I mean, whatever. What was up with V.C. Andrews and her incest? I am scarred. I have an inner 13-year-old girl that looks back at me in the mirror and says, why the hell did you make me read that? What was that about? Anyway, I digress. So honestly, when we're looking at the amount of content and we're looking at how much we are willing to put in our brain at night, and I realize that a lot of times we just need a good book and we need to unplug and it needs to be fanciful and it doesn't need to be anything that we are complicatedly trying to figure out. I understand unwinding at night. Yet the point I'm making is that people still read novels. Okay? So here's my TLDR debunk point. People still read novels. And granted, the internet is not exactly a space to post a novel on a Facebook post. That's not the right format for it. However, the internet is also where we get a lot of our information, gang. Think about the double-edged sword here. Meme societies collapse. They fall in on themselves because their population dummies down so much that they can't even describe the freight train that's mowing them over sociologically as it's happening. They don't even know what it is. It's just the large metal god from the sky that flattened them out. They don't have an idea it's a freight train. They don't have any idea to not stand on the track, and if they wouldn't have stood on the track, they wouldn't have gotten killed. This is the way we deconstruct society, is tell people it's not cool to get an education. Tell them that it's not cool to actually research anything. Tell them that the researchers are the devil, and the researchers are trying to put the devil in their mind. So come to my website and read my baby bird fact stuffing nugget. Here. And this is where we get QAnon and all these other crazy places out there, is that people, they keep their content short, or it's super rambling and full of crazy plot lines, and it's more like reading a novel. So a meme society is destined to collapse for 2 reasons. One, the population no longer feels the emotional or spiritual need to invest in their own knowledge or in applying that knowledge to anyone outside of themselves. A meme society, by the very nature of it, is a consumption-driven modality. It's give me the next meme, give me the next picture, give me the next witty thing to share. I need engagement. Again, addiction. Take, give, desperate. Ugh. You know, this is a hard phenomenon for me to watch. And I mean, I can be succinct for sure. I can be pithily succinct, and I try not to be honest with you. I used to front a band, gang, okay? At any given time, I have 70 or 80 cutting one-liners just waiting in the queue. I don't let them fly like I used to. I'm certainly not in that phase of my life. Doesn't mean they're not in there. And, you know, it's hard when we need to construct situations where details are important, but we're met with a society that doesn't want to engage the details. And we have a million excuses for this. Again, remember, accountability or lack therein is one of the big signs of addiction. So it's never our fault that we can't educate ourselves. Now, I'm not saying you need to go sit down and read the Magna Carta from the top to back. I'm not saying you need to memorize the Constitution here. I'm saying just, it won't kill you to read a 2,000-word blog post. It won't even kill you to read a 4,000-word blog post. And did you know, you'll find this interesting, brain science, Mr. Brain Science. Did you know that it takes, on average, about 5 minutes of steady focus on one topic for the brain to truly accept it as a fact? That's a true story. The brain has got to stay engaged for about 5 to 15 minutes before it will begin to emotionally attach itself to the content. And there's a bunch of brain mechanics reasons for this. The primary one being that your brain is processing so many different things at one time. So many different things that by the time you get to the space where you're actually just paying attention to something, your background servers in your brain have been working on 50 other things up to that 5-minute point. Then your brain kind of realizes, oh, you're watching this one thing. I should probably pay attention. This is why binge watching is such a thing. Okay? You ever notice? Watch your brain. Watch your fidget habit. You sit down, you got your favorite TV show. Right now I'm binge watching Good Girls with my wife. And you just sit down on Netflix and you're going for it and you're just watching this program. And for the first minute or 2 or 3, up to the first 5, you're kind of fidgeting, you're kind of fussing with your popcorn, you're fussing with your blanket, you're fussing with your pillow. You're watching TV, but you're dinking with the volume, you're farting around with where your feet go. And all of a sudden, about 5 minutes in, all of that stops. And you're just a paperweight, a lump on the couch. It's because the brain has finally received enough signals that this is where 100% of your attention should be. And then all of a sudden in 5 seconds, your show is over and you're on to the next binge watch. And if you stay on the couch, that's why you just go from episode to episode to episode to episode. Once we train our brain to be in, it's almost a hypnotic place, to be relaxed, zoning out on something like that, it doesn't want to disengage. It doesn't want to move because it feels good to pay attention. I'm going to say that again. It feels good to pay attention. So if we give ourselves an opportunity, 5 minutes or more, to go ahead and pay attention to something that's important to us, we will retain the information. So length of attention on something is equal to the brain's ability to retain it. Now we're just going to do a big old conspiracy wraparound. Here we go. Actually, it's not a conspiracy wraparound. It makes a lot of sense. If it takes more than 5 minutes, 5 minutes or more of the brain just really, really focusing on one thing to really accept it as a truth, which is why people get super attached to fictional TV characters. Seriously, think about it. We're watching Game of Thrones. We're crying over Tyrion Lannister, or we're crying over some character. Why? It's a fake world. Those aren't even real people. They're actors. But our brain doesn't know that because we've paid attention to them for 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 seasons. And our brain translates that as fact. Seriously, there's a lot of brain science between focusing your attention places. And there's a reason why people who are able to focus their attentions or willing, and some people genuinely struggle with this. You know, there's ADHD, there's ADD. There are legitimate issues that people have got to work with to sometimes harness their own power of focus. And I get that. I'm just talking kind of our average everyday Joe that can't be bothered, okay, to read something here. Yet for people who choose to focus, these are your Steve Jobs. These are your very, very your Elon Musks. These are the very successful people who are willing to engage even past the point of them not understanding something. They'll hang in there with the content until the brain relaxes enough and they can understand it. Why am I hitting this so hard? Because if I don't want you to become attached to something, if I don't want you to become attached to a modality or an ideology, if I don't want you to have an emotional attachment to a solution, then I need to keep convincing you that your attention span is crap. And I need to keep convincing you that it's not cool to read a long thing. TLDR. I need a 1 or 2 minute read. I can't be bothered because I'm hip and I'm cool. And this is what my hip, cool generation does, whatever generation that is. I need to keep you unengaged. I need to keep you detached from your information, not only the details in the information, but I need to keep your brain detached from making that brainwave calm down connection to absorb the information. Because the minute you do, you're not going to listen to my pithy meme that makes fun of people. You're not going to listen to my snarky meme that paints one side or the other as the problem. You're going to want to know why that's, why? Why did you say that? What's that about? Where did you get that information? That's not consistent with the emotional attachment I have to the data that I read that's put out by some science organization. I mean, honestly, if I am a maniacal weirdo and I want to keep everybody under my thumb in an addictive cycle of reacting and reaction, seeking that which I'm trying to sell them, I better damn well make sure you think it's uncool for you to connect with content. So, when we look at TLDR, I understand that sometimes things are too long. And there are things that I start to read and I have to bail. I'm in there 20 minutes on a New York Times article or a New York Magazine article, and I just got to bail on it because I'm like, wow, I'm going to come back to this later. My brain is full at 20 minutes of reading and I'm done. But I'll come back to it. Sometimes I won't. And so I do understand that sometimes it's too long. The bigger issue I'm talking about here is the propagation of the cultural belief that we don't need to attach to anything or that we can get the same amount of content or really quality out of 1/10 of the effort. It is the intellectual version of a 1980s diet pill. And I'm watching society fail under the weight of a lack of critical thinking. And the problem with that is that in order to evolve society, we have got to literally engage our brains. We've got to be coming up with amazing modalities that this world has never seen to work together, to work through differences, to work past not only economic divides, but we've got to come together to put our best minds together to work past energy issues, to work past rising sea levels that are coming, and a TLDR mentality ain't gonna cut it. Okay, we're not going to get the answers we need by just bopping along, hoping somebody else is fixing the problem. And in the meantime, the whole world is drowning in ignorance and cat videos. Okay, so there is a spiritual affliction, a spiritual laziness, I guess that's the best way to put it, that comes with not wanting to truly engage content and pay attention. And yes, I get that a lot of us have been overwhelmed and there's COVID and there's a million reasons why we don't really want to pay attention in the world. Yet there's a lot of amazing things to pay attention to. Okay, and I have a lot of friends who say, I don't even listen to the news anymore. I don't read my phone anymore. Your phone is going to give you the news based on the algorithm or search patterns that you've programmed into it. So if you're tired of seeing things about politics, stop clicking on articles about politics. If you're tired of seeing articles about Donald Trump or Biden or Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi, stop clicking on those articles, because then the search engine says, well, they like this. I'll go get them more of Biden, Trump, Pelosi, McConnell. And you get it all. So it's not that the news is saturated with this. It's that is a reflection of your search habits. I tried a very interesting experiment, which was to utterly disengage from clicking on anything political. And instead, I would Google Nat Geo articles about electromagnetic disturbances in the crust of the earth, or science facts, or lots of NASA stuff. And it really only took about 2 or 3 days for that search engine to dump everything that was Biden, Trump, McConnell, Pelosi. And all of a sudden, I was just reading about baby panda bears being born and amazing Arctic explorations. And the world became this beautiful, open, gorgeous thing where I could learn anything. No kidding. This is a true story. So when we want to say, well, I don't want to pay attention to anything because the news is so negative, change your search habits. Literally, I challenge you for this. I challenge you to change what comes up on your phone. And if you don't think, in terms of searching news, and if you don't think that it's a thing, try searching zebras nonstop for 2 days. All you will get in your feed is news about zebras. And it will show you the idiocy that is associated with thinking that the world is a reflection of the news feed on our mobile devices. It's insanity what's going on. So back to the meme society, too long didn't read. And again, I understand we all need to just zone out sometimes. But this is a bigger concept that has to do with an unwillingness to engage content. And really, I do believe that under that, when I look into that energy, I see a fear in people, gang. These angels show me a fear that we have in trusting ourselves, that if we engage the content or we engage the facts, that there'll be actual facts, or that we'll be able to be smart enough, quote, smart enough to get it. And look, I enjoy a pithy meme with the best of them. I really do. I love to share memes. Yet at the same time, I also take the time to read. I read about very low frequency arrays because it's interesting and it helps me in my work. And it helps me understand what these angels are talking about sometimes when they're trying to describe something to me. I read about interesting things in the galaxy and the universe. I read about how deep space engines could be made. And it's not because I'm a super genius. It's because I want to keep my prefrontal cortex trained to absorb information in a complex way. And that kind of moves me to this kind of last quarter of the podcast, which, really has to do with what happens to our brain when we don't work it out. Your brain, it's not a muscle, yet it's an electromagnetic net whose roads are paved by your decision to place your consciousness in one place or another. And our emotions decide what the roads are made of. Our brain is a chemical soup, and our emotionality is reflected from the chemicals that are released in our brain. So basically, our brain has all of these roads in it, and within those roads, they're made of chemicals of emotions. And if I am training my brain to only make roads, little bitty stretches of roads that are 100 yards long, from one thought to the next thought to the next thought, that are strictly about serotonin, strictly about getting high in the moment in my brain, then when it's time for me to sit down and, I just bought a house, I better look at the contract for my home, my brain is going to crap a brick. Because I'm asking it to focus in a way that it doesn't have any roads made for that. We've been a sprinter. We've been sprinting with cat videos and howling dogs and funny little memes about kangaroos. I mean, what do you want me to engage this contract for? The more we make short connections in the brain with what I call burn-off chemicals, like the happy chemicals, like I need some serotonin and some dopamine, a shot of that. Back in the 80s, that was called cocaine. You just did a snort. 20 minutes later, you were high, you were done. And now we use our brain for the coke high. And we stick sugar in there and we stick sex in there. And we want that 20-minute high. Food, whatever it is, funniness, scrolling, the newness of funny information. And pretty soon, we don't have the capacity in the brain to go the long distance. And any society whose really their base population cannot hold together information is a society that is very easy to program. And you program those folks from one tiny little news bite to the next. And then all those people shake their angry fists at the news and say, look at that media, they're trying to manipulate me. Well, no. They're giving you what you're asking for, TLDR, because they have people who advertise with them, and those advertisers need to see good numbers. So you need to zoom in, watch for very little content, and then zoom out. So what I would leave us with today is when we look at famous empires that have fallen, they've all been empires that have limited the education of their people or have separated a class of people, some of which could read and were educated, and others that were just plebes. And Rome at one time encouraged education for everybody, including slaves, including women. They wanted everybody to be able to read because they figured that an intelligent population would be initially easier to manage. This is actually true. unless you have non-intelligent people running the ship. Then they're going to get really, really uncomfortable with intelligent people out in society. Those people are going to make them feel challenged and lesser than. So if we have not as intelligent people, and that lack of intelligence could be anything. It could be a lack of desire to engage learning. It could be a baby bird thing where that person's perfectly fine being stuffed full of information and they never want to expand past it because their little belly is full. It could be that maybe that person just is not inclined to have the brain capacity to be able to hold a lot of information. However, generally, when you have people in charge who aren't very bright, they could be bright. They just choose not to be. And they would appreciate it if everybody else also wasn't. And this is where we get our authoritarians, generally charismatic people who may or may not be very intelligent. You know, the one exception to this that I see is old Vlad Putin over there, old Mr. ex-KGB. That guy's got an IQ off the charts. And so he's like Hannibal Lecter. He's playing chess from a whole different angle while all these other garden variety authoritarians are bustling around with their armies and their missiles looking fabulous and talking nonsense. He's over there going, da, da, and drinking his vodka and laughing, pulling the strings. So when we look at a society that is educated, and I don't mean you got to go get a freaking degree, gang. I just mean pay attention for 5 minutes or more to something. Pay attention. Don't be afraid to. Because when we look at an educated society, we see a spiritually mature society. The more educated we are, and by educated, I mean filled with knowledge. Okay, so I'm going to rechange that word. This angel that's here with me would like me to swap out that word because education, they're telling me, can be construed to mean you have a college degree. I don't have a college degree, gang. I do not have a college degree. I do not. I had a full ride scholarship at the University of Arizona for theater, for musical theater. And I lasted about a year, and I just was not focused enough to be in school. I didn't want to go to college for performance, but my parents were of the generation that you had to go to school. And so I pretty much just handed back my scholarship and quit because I didn't enjoy it. And then I went and got a record deal, and that led to another record deal and other performance opportunities. And so I never got back to college. So I'm not talking about book smart. I'm talking about the willingness to engage knowledge. Okay? To be able to engage knowledge is to be open to spiritual growth, and it is also to be open to giving away ego. A meme society builds its self-identity externally from a series of Post-it notes and bumper stickers. Literally, we're building a bodysuit of ideologies. That's a meme society. A person who is well-rounded in knowledge doesn't need to encapsulate themselves or wrap themselves up in the bumper sticker or the giant Post-it note section to have an identity. Now, if I am a sociopathic consumerist system, I need you to be wrapped in bumper stickers because then I can sell you product that matches your bumper sticker, and your brain's not going to go any farther than this my identity, this my thing I buy cause it like my bumper sticker. And that's where a lot of America is at, gang. And it just pains me to look at this, but it's true. They're like that on the right. They're like that on the left. They're like that in the middle. We are on a vast autopilot in the richest country in the world overall. We're on autopilot because we're the cows with our head in the trough. And for those of you that don't live in an agricultural area, you may not get this allegory here. However, to be a cow with your head in the trough, if you look at a stockyard, they'll kind of shoo cows towards a feeding trough. And a lot of times they need to make sure that cows don't get pushed out of the way by other cows who are more aggressive. They need all the cows to be equally fat if they're going to feed them and butcher them. So what they'll do a lot of times is lock the cattle's head in a feeding grate, and they can't move. All they can do is eat silage, which is a corn byproduct. Like, you know, when you look at the corn stalks that grow out in a field, silage is the cut up corn stalks and sometimes cut up corn itself. And it's all sugar and starch, and we're feeding our cows this, right? So the cows are eating. And the cows don't have anything else to do because their head is locked right above the feeding trough. So they eat. And then eventually their little heads are let go and the cows wander and they bring in a new group of cows and lock their heads in the trough and they eat. It's very inhumane, and that's a stockyard for you. Yet America, we are trained to be those cows with our head in the trough. And if we realize, and maybe we've got, 3 minutes of corn eating, 4 minutes, but it's short of 5, because then we'd be very aware of what we're doing, and that might not work out so well. And they release us from our little headlock, and off we go until it's our turn again at the trough. And here we think we're kings in America with our heads locked in the trough, forced to eat this stuff, and we're just eating away thinking we're fabulous and fat. So why bring this up? I bring it up because if you still question the 5-minute or more rule in attention span, and you still question if it works, look at the advent of all of the shop-at-home networks. Look at the advent of infomercials. Those are at the very least 5 minutes long, usually 10 to 15 minutes. Half an hour if somebody's got a lot of money, but it better be interesting. And get ready to laugh. No, really, I'm going to give you a second to brace up here. I am a film director, and I learned it just doing it. And I learned it hands-on. I'm a big hands-on learner. I'm a very slow reader. It takes me a minute to read. So I tend to be a kinesthetic learner, learning by doing, and a verbal learner, a visual learner, an auditory learner, but I will still take the time to read. And as a film director and as a film producer, I got a job one time, and my job was to produce infomercials. Basically, it was called travel tourism, but they were effing infomercials. Let's not sugarcoat it. And my job was to take information and polish it up and put these infomercials on a closed circuit travel channel called the Adventure Television Network that was going on in a 5-state area in hotels. In upscale hotels. Like if you wanted to see what was going on in Yellowstone Park or whatever, you'd go to this closed circuit station and it would play this content. Well, I had a really hard time with the idea of an infomercial, so I pitched the owner of the network on me directing mini documentaries instead. And so I would go out and talk to these businesses, and I only picked businesses that I was super interested in, like a mom and pop business who was started by immigrants, and, they started it with their last dime, and it blew into this really cool community thing. Like, I wanted to cover what made them special, mini documentaries. So apparently the Adventure TV Network, it's not around anymore, but it was around in the 90s, was struggling because they were having a hard time finding, quote, salespeople for infomercials. But I was a producer, a content producer. So they hired me and they said, okay, well, sure, make a mini documentary, whatever you want to call it. I came back in the next week with a stack of 15-minute signed contracts from all these different businesses. And the owner of the network about fell out of his chair because the 15-minute slots weren't cheap. And he said, how did you sell that? And I said, I didn't sell it. I am legitimately interested in telling the story of all of these businesses, and I'm going to do a dang good job talking about why they're special. And that will fulfill your need for an infomercial or whatever for your network. And the businesses whose infomercials were over 5 minutes had a massive return, or their mini documentaries, as they were shot by me, had a massive return that literally cited seeing these stories on Adventure TV Network. Now, a few of them that did the shorter ones, the 5 minutes, they had a few, but it's harder for the brain to engage content, okay? And the funny thing is, if you were to print out a script for something that's about 15 minutes long, then you would be reading something 15 pages long. Okay, it's about a minute a page in a script. So when we're talking about the TLDR phenomenon, too long, I can't read it. I can't read 2 minutes. I can't read. That's 2 pages of a script you're reading. All right, 15 minutes of watch time is 15 pages. People don't have a problem watching something for 15 minutes, but the idea of reading it, of stopping and absorbing and not being entertained there is an emotional laziness to that lack of commitment there. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm going to run right out and read a 15-page article, okay? What I am saying is that, well, I might if it's really good. I'm not going to lie. However, when we see the TLDR prompt, read the article. I guarantee you there's something amazing in there, and it will cause you to grow as a human being. I am certainly no super genius. Like I said, I don't have a degree. I'm a citizen scientist. I accrue information like a maniac. I am not a degreed person, okay? Yet I've done a lot of stuff in my life because I've learned how. And that learning involves prefrontal cortex connection. So just a couple real quick bullet points as we wrap this podcast up. Let's step away from being the meme society. Let's not be afraid to engage great content. Sure, read the stuff you love to read at the end of the night. Let your brain zone out. Watch Good Girls. Do your thing. Yet don't be afraid to engage content. When you see an article that's 8 minutes, an 8-minute long read it if you're interested in it. Because this is a lie that society doesn't have an attention span. We do. Our brains are meant for long-term data storage. We're just training our brains to be paved with these little short sprints of addictive chemical responses to little bitty meme-like prompts. We're making ourselves really, really stupid. And we're doing it to ourselves. Make sure you're eating enough protein, whether that is meat protein or complex plant proteins. That's what grew the prefrontal cortex of our brain was proteins. Make sure that you're getting amino acids in there. Make sure that your omegas are high. Let's feed our brains, because you know what happens when we have big brains? Do you know what happens when our brains function amazingly well? People who have documented IQs that are quite high, or EQs, which is an emotional quotient, have amazing thresholds for compassion. They have insane thresholds for problem solving, for responding, not reacting. The more vast and built and brilliant our brain, the greater the opportunity it is to be ingenious translators for brilliant pieces to come through this world to make it better. And those are the leaders that then have the big shoulders to not react and become weirdos every time something gets rocky, because they have the brain power to process all of the complex situations. Reactionary behavior can be a symptom. It's not always. It can be a symptom of many things. But in terms of intelligence, it can be a symptom of perhaps a lack of engaged intelligence. And notice I said engaged intelligence. I honestly believe that all of us are brilliant in our own way. And when we refuse to engage our critical thinking, when we just won't. We're these spitting reactionary weirdos throwing rocks at the moon. So know that if you see TLDR, read it. Let's not become the meme society. Rome fell apart the minute they stopped educating their people. Every great society, England fell in on itself the minute that the plague went through, the minute that the kings kept all the knowledge, the minute that the church took over and starved everybody out, the dark ages hit, which weren't actually as dark as we thought they were, as it turns out, but they were still pretty crappy. These societies collapsed. We are not in the same position in the United States. You know, most people have some sort of smartphone or some sort of computer, or most people can even get a hold of a big old print newspaper. And it doesn't mean you have to engage current events. Go to the library, for God's sakes. Read about something that blows your mind. Read about the mechanics of the world. Read about psychology, or read about physics, or read about something, cooking, anything, design, anything that you love. Let your brain map itself to be the most brilliant channeling device that you possibly can be. The TLDR society is a myth. It's a myth. We can become it. We are it right now. Yet it's a myth that we have to be it. So let's just remember, engage content, engage your brain, become the compassionate problem solver that you have been built to be. Sure, put your feet up, drink a margarita once in a while, zone out. Got to do that too. It's healthy. But let us not be afraid to grow and learn. And let's put past our American addiction to convenience, because it really does make stupid noodles, gang. Stupid noodles between the ears. And you are not meant to undervalue your mind. You are brilliant and unique. You have an intelligence that nobody else has. Are you hearing me? You do. And if you're saying, oh, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Some asshat told you that you weren't intelligent. Well, F them. That's not true. You have a gift and an ability. You do. That the world is waiting for. Don't be afraid to engage it. Don't let anybody else ever define you as smart or not smart. Not even me. You give yourself a chance to grow and let your brilliance shine in this world. I can't wait to see what you're going to bring through. And I will see you next podcast.